You know, life was so good for so long for us that it was almost like living in a fantasy. It was almost like on a daily basis, pinch me, is this real?
It was June 2007, a bright sunny morning, 2 weeks before summer vacation. Minutes before the terror. Eduardo and Jane Valseca and their 3 children arrived at the country school not far from their ranch house outside San Miguel de Allende in Mexico.
As we pulled into the parking lot, I noticed that there was a small compact car in the far corner of the parking lot. And there was a man at the wheel who had a fisherman's cap, khaki color, on and glasses.
A prospective parent, perhaps, for next year's class? Jane walked the children to their classrooms. She stopped at the school office
and asked the administrator if she knew who the gentleman was or if he needed help. And she looked over and looked across the parking lot and said, "I don't know who he is. He must be waiting for someone."
Eduardo was behind the wheel of the Jeep, listening to the radio. The stranger's car was beyond it, at the back of the lot.
As I walked to the Jeep where my husband was, I looked across and made eye contact with him and I actually smiled. And he smiled back.
Eduardo put the Jeep in gear, pulled away. The strange car fell in behind them.
A pickup truck comes out of nowhere. It catches up to us, and the man driving turns and looks at us. And the look was really scary.
Your son?
We both got just a really creepy feeling, just the way the man looked at us.
Now that strange car and the pickup truck raced to positions beside and in front of the Jeep.
Eduardo said, "Something is definitely not right. What is this guy doing?"
And then at moments it was obvious. Jane and Eduardo were being chased, herded like cattle into a chute with no escape.
In the distance, we see the compact car that has raced up our interior road, cut in front.
Here she relived it, the horrified moment as the car in front of them suddenly stopped and Eduardo slammed on his brake.
Immediately we're hit from behind. And at that point, it was a split of a second, and there was a man coming out of the passenger side of the car, coming at Eduardo, and he's got a hammer in one hand and a handgun in the next.
The masked man shattered the window, landed a hard blow to Eduardo's head that sent blood gushing down his face.
The first thing I started thinking of was my children. Are my children going to lose their parents right now?
A second attacker ran at Jane, yanked open her door, pulled her from the Jeep. She screamed, kicked at him, grabbed the fence beside her. The barbed wire sliced through her finger. Her attacker forced her down.
While I'm laying on the ground, he just points the gun at my forehead and tells me in Spanish to get up. The first thing I said to him was, "Please don't kill me, I have 3 children."
Then they hustled Jane and Eduardo into a waiting SUV. Unseen accomplices snapped pillowcases over their heads and tightly bound their hands and feet.
Eduardo was hysterical. I don't think he was completely hearing me. He probably had a concussion.
The SUV sped away. Jane tried to comfort Eduardo. One of the abductors threatened more pain.
He kept yelling at him, "Shut up, you or I'll give you another one." And you could tell he was trying to disguise his voice.
Within minutes, word of the attack got back to the school. Something was wrong. The teacher rushed to the now abandoned Jeep.
I went with my partner, and the left window was all broken, and blood was in the ground. And I had that feeling that was a kidnapping.
In the SUV, under that gagging pillowcase, Jane struggled to breathe. She reached out for Eduardo.
I felt blood all down his arm.
Then she felt the blood pouring from her own slashed finger. She tried to memorize each bump and turn as the SUV veered onto the highway towards San Miguel. Then, minutes later, pulled over, stopped. Someone yanked Eduardo from the SUV. He screamed.
I hear the doors of that vehicle open, and after I hear them shut, I can no longer hear my husband's muffled screams. Then I hear what sounds like the engine of that car revving, as if it's pulling away.
Jane managed to lift the pillowcase hood just in time to see Eduardo vanish.
I am able to make out the type of car that it is, more or less, and I memorized the license plates.
And just as quickly, she realized she was alone. They'd all left.
I was bound, so I threw myself over the seat, ended up in the floor, pulled myself up, opened the door, and literally hopped as if I was in a sack race to the highway in flip-flops.
An elderly man stopped to help. He had a machete, but no cell phone to call police. Frantically, Jane tried to flag down passing cars. All hit the accelerator, not the brake.
And I'm begging them to please stop and help me. But I imagine it looked pretty scary to see a woman bleeding, desperate, bound in duct tape, and next to a guy with a machete.
Then, in sheer desperation, Jane stepped in front of an oncoming bus.
He was coming this way. I jumped in front, and I just put my hands up like this. And I hoped he stopped.
But no cell phone on the bus either. Now the bus driver flagged down a taxi, and the taxi driver called the police.
All of this information is going from me to the taxi driver to the dispatcher to the police, and the police to the dispatcher, and the whole way around. So it was like playing telephone.
Was there still time for the police to seal off the town, save her husband?
And I thought, because I had this description in the plates, I thought for sure that the police would run off in every direction, seal off San Miguel, and we'd have him. End of story. But it didn't go that way.
No, it didn't. Jane says the police tried one escape highway, no other. And no Eduardo. He had been kidnapped.
These people carried this whole operation out with such precision and such surprising professionalism, which seems a strange word to even use.
How long did it take them?
Seconds. They were cool as cucumbers.
But that was just the first clue. On the ground beside the SUV in which the kidnappers abandoned Jane was another, inside an envelope, addressed to Jane.
The first thing that went through my mind was, well, I realized that they'd spelled my name correctly. My name is Jane, spelled with a Y. So it was really scary to see on the envelope that they'd actually spelled my name right.
Nobody spells your name right.
No.
And inside the envelope?
The ransom note says, Senora, go home, open this email with this password, and we have Eduardo. Eduardo is with us. Wait for our message to arrive.
It was then she understood. The kidnappers had been watching them, stalking them, researching every small detail.
It immediately made me realize I needed to be very careful and very smart about the choices I was about to make. My husband's life was on the line.